Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com and today I'm here with Joseph Michael. Hi Joe.
Hello, Joanna. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, it's good to have you on the show finally. I feel like we've been talking for years and we've done webinars and then I was like, "Oh, I haven't actually had you on the podcast." So, but in case people don't know you, a little introduction. Joe is known as the Scrivener Coach and he has a fantastic online course, Learn Scrivener Fast, which I've done and recommend highly to everybody. And as well as being a serial entrepreneur and a family man, which is very important and we'll be talking about that. But Joe, just start by giving us a bit of a potted history of your entrepreneurial life and how you got to where you are today.
Sure, yeah. It's a funny story actually. It's just I was a normal working guy, had a normal career. I was very entrepreneurial from a young age, and I always like to experiment with things. And of course, like most entrepreneurs, I failed at a lot of stuff. And I was at the time in my career where I had a decent job, and I remember thinking, I just got to suck it up and just play this corporate game, right? Like the entrepreneur stuff, I'm tired of failing. I'm tired of all that. And, I was really just, I was kind of depressed about it. I mean, it's kind of depressing, right? So,
What were you actually doing? What was your corporate job?
I was working in a marketing department for a casino company. So I got to do a different, design and marketing and stuff like that. I kind of enjoyed, what I was doing, but climbing that corporate ladder was just taking too long for me. And like you said, family man. So I had our second child on the way, and we were saving for a house and trying to pay off some debt. And so this was a time in my career where I was like, I guess I got to get some side income, right? I got to start making some more money somehow. So I started looking for pizza delivery positions that I could probably do like in the evening, right? I heard some guys that saying, hey, make an extra, few $100 a month. I was like, well, that would kind of be life changing for me at the time. So I started applying for these pizza delivery positions, and funny thing is, I kept getting rejected from them.
Thank goodness for
Um,
that.
yes, I'm looking back thinking, man, every time I drive by one of those places, I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't get hired. It was, I mean, kind of like for silly reasons, right? I didn't have pizza delivery driver experience, which, I mean, how hard can it be, right? Especially with technology now. But it was like three or four applications that got rejected. And I was kind of down and, a little bruised ego, right? So this was the time I started to research making money online and what could I use my skills for and knowledge for, and how could I teach and help. And I had no idea that you could actually help people online make an income from it, and everybody wins. So it was amazing. And that's when I started blogging, writing, discovered a fantastic tool for organizing all my content, which is Scrivener. And, long story short, I found a lot of people struggled with Scrivener. And so I just found this unique spot in the market to where I knew I could teach people the software. I'd always been kind of a software tech geek kind of a guy, and I like breaking complex things down into small, manageable, step-by-step instructions. And turns out it was a big hit, and it's quite life-changing in a very short amount of time. This is now my full-time deal, so I quit that old day job, and I've kind of quadrupled my day job income, which is just mind-blowing for me, considering I was just wanting to make an extra $300. So it's been a fun journey, and there's lots more details I'm sure we can get into along the way.
Yeah, no, and I'm personally very grateful to you for working out Scrivener for all of us, because it's so interesting how as writers, it's one of the most powerful tools there is out there, and I love it. I don't know if I could do this job without it. I mean, it really is a life-changing tool. And what's so crazy is you didn't invent the tool. You have a training course that helps people actually use the tool. So just start by, I guess, telling, if people don't use Scrivener or whatever now, just give people a bit of an overview about what you use it for, because you're not actually writing novels or anything, are you? And then also, what are the top things that, people love about Scrivener?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I started using it to write blog posts. People are actually loving it now. It's kind of a big wave of bloggers all raving about Scrivener, but this wasn't the real main use. When it was first developed, it was for novelists, right? It was created by writers, for writers, helps them really organize all kinds of long-form content, 3 or 4 different blogs going, and I needed a way to organize all of them my content, when I was posting, my schedules. And Scrivener is an amazing database type tool, as well as writing and organizing and structuring. And so I started using it like that, and I was just a huge, huge fan of it. And so I started, realizing that people were talking about it. It's kind of the new car syndrome. When you buy a new car, you see that car everywhere, right? So I was using Scrivener, and I kept hearing people talk about Scrivener. And I found this common trend of people being really, really obsessed with it. People talking about they want to marry Scrivener and have its adorable, organized babies, right? These are the kind of tweets that people were posting on Twitter. To the very next tweet going, oh yeah, I tried it, but I gave up because I couldn't wrap my head around the learning curve, and I don't have time to learn it. And so there was this highly passionate group of people who had been using it, and then there was this other group that wanted to use it, but they just couldn't figure out how. And I remember that bothered me because I knew the power of the tool. I knew what it could do. And I started researching deeper into that and figuring out how people were using it. Obviously, novelists, writers were swearing by it. And from there, I just said, you know what, I've got to create a course here to help people. I bet I could help someone by watching my screen. Because then I started to look into, well, what's out there for people to learn it? And there's Scrivener for Dummies. There's a lot of written material. There's a few YouTube videos and things like that, but nothing really organized and really step by step. Just, watch what I do, follow my clicks. Here's what you can do. And so I started little by little just creating some tutorials and interacting with people on Twitter was basically where I found most of the writer folks, and just saying, hey, what do you think of this? Is this helpful? And started out really slow, and people were just, yeah, oh, that's so helpful. Could you do a tutorial on this or that? And really, it's the writer audience that helped me build and create the course into what it is today.
It's so interesting. Sorry, about blogging. I mean, I don't use it for blogging at all. So it's always weird for me to hear you say that, because I'm like, yeah, I just don't. It's really strange. But that's what I guess people use Microsoft Word for all kinds of things, and Scrivener's, as we say, Word on steroids or whatever. I still can't understand. Yes. Although I was talking to Nick Stevenson the other day, and I think he said he still doesn't use it. I mean, there are some people who are just not converts.
Right. It's one of those things where it's like, if you've got something that's working for you, like, stick with it. And I think that's how people are. But I always tell people Scrivener is one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. Like, you've got to see what you're missing. And once you see a couple little things, and I mean, its publishing capabilities alone are worth, the low cost of, $40-45. You can publish to, Kindle, Mobi, EPUB, all these different formats with the push of a couple buttons. So it does a lot of the heavy lifting for folks, and I think they really like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I know people who actually just use the formatting and output a file ready for CreateSpace, which is crazy. I don't do that. I get someone to format it for me. I export the Word file and get someone to format it. But, you can actually get it down to that level where you just export your finished files. I do use it to publish to Kindle and to all the other platforms, and it's just super amazing. But what talking about, people taking it further and not knowing, I'm now using dictation into Scrivener, which, well, and I can already see, like, I'm in this very honeymoonish phase right now where I can see the incredible shift in what can be achieved. Like, with these two things together, with dictation and Scrivener, you can run like a multi-million-dollar publishing, industry.
Oh, the possibilities are endless. I think we've never been in a more exciting time with opportunity in front of us and the tools to take advantage of that opportunity. It's just amazing.
Yeah. So what are the other things, like when you're sharing, we've done a number of webinars, and there's always things that people go, oh, that's so exciting. Just share a couple of the things that authors tend to find exciting about Scrivener, apart from the publishing side.
Sure. Yeah. Well, right off the bat, there's a virtual corkboard that it's known for, and it's got index cards on that corkboard. You can move them around. Think of people brainstorming on a desk, and they've got lots of index cards, and they're, trying to figure out where pieces of the story fit and so on. Well, you can do all that right on your screen with Scrivener, which is really amazing. But they've also got a couple other views that really complement each other in the same way. So they built Scrivener to adapt to people's different writing styles and not to box people into any one style. So whether you're, you like to plan out your story all in advance, you could totally do that. Or whether you like to just write on the fly and organize later, you can do that as well. So it allows you to write in pieces. So you can create a folder, and then underneath that you can create a document like that goes into that folder. And when I teach webinars, I always show people a picture of a binder, right? Like a physical 3-ring binder. And I tell people, think of Scrivener like that, because it's going to keep everything together in your binder, nice and neat and organized, right? And so you've got this binder, and then inside the binder, you've got folders. It's got like a sidebar on your screen, and then you've got, sub-documents that you can put in. And what's neat is you can drag and drop these around inside the program to reorganize them and rearrange them in a multitude of ways. So you can do it on the corkboard with your index cards. And they've also got these other views, like an outline view that can add a lot of detail. And you can kind of, for those of you familiar with the terminology, you can tag things, you can label them. So for instance, if you're writing a story and you want to use characters, and I always give this example of Hunger Games in one of my webinars, and you could set up the character names, and you can label a scene from whose point of view you're writing that scene from. And so with a click of a button, you can instantly see all the scenes that have a certain character's point of view. And so it makes the writer so much more efficient, instead of their writing just being a mess and, taking them probably 2 or 3 times as long to finish because they've got a handle on it. So those are just a couple things, and you can color code. People don't realize, like, you can really use all these little knickknacks, and I think people always love the colors when we're showing them in the webinar, because you can pick a different color for each character. You also can label your scenes, your documents, as the status that they're in. So whether it's a first draft, revised draft, finished, all these kind of things. And so if you sit down at your computer and you're like, okay, I need to work on the things that are in first draft mode, you can instantly click that. It'll sort those right to the top for you. And then you've got all these other labels there, which, okay, this is my first draft scene, and it's in the perspective of this character, and so on, and you can start writing. On top of that, I think it would be horrible if I skipped over the fact that you can set targets, right? And I know you're a big fan of this.
I love the targets, yeah.
Yeah, so you can set targets and deadlines and see how many words you're going to write for a particular scene or project. So if you want to get a scene, and I know bloggers do this, the ones that I work with, they say, I want to write 1,000-word blog post. I can set that target, and there's this cool little meter, this colored meter bar at the bottom that kind of goes from red to green as you get closer to your word goal. And so you can imagine how beneficial this is for NaNoWriMo. People set their word goals, and it keeps them going. So there's a lot of really cool tricks like that are built in, and we could talk hours of just the features and cool little benefits of Scrivener, but those are the main ones that people really ooh and ah about.
Yeah, and that word count thing, you can have it calculate backwards. So if you say, like, my 70,000 word draft has to be done by the end of the month, and I'm going to write 6 days a week, it will tell you how many words you have to do each time. So that backwards calculation is just super useful for production planning, which is what most professionally minded authors are doing these days. It's sort of, I need to have things done by this date. So I agree with you, that feature is fantastic. So, I mean, like you said, we could go on about Scrivener, but what I wanted to ask you about particularly is the course as well, because people don't need a course to learn Scrivener. Obviously, they can use the software itself has a help documentation. There are videos, as you say. But I think what makes your course different is you have very short videos. So if you only want to, like, when I haven't been through every video, I don't know, whether people do, but you kind of go, I don't know how to do this, so I'm just going to watch a 3-minute video. So that's obviously one of the things that you've learned to do. But I wonder if you can give us a few tips for, if people want to create a successful online course, and yours is very successful and enabled you to leave your job. What are your top tips for creating a course that sells?
So yeah, I'm actually in the process of creating a course for people who want to create their course, right? So I've been asked about this so many times from people who've gone through my course. And I always tell people that you've got to start from the perspective of the learner. So when I first started creating Learn Scrivener Fast, I realized 2 things, is that people are short on time more than ever these days. Trying to fit learning into their schedule is hard. And number 2, people have a shorter attention span now, and it's rapidly decreasing. I think we've officially gone underneath the goldfish in the attention span of 8 or 9 seconds now, which is pretty crazy. But our society just is fast-paced, and attention spans are dropping. And when I was doing some research, I realized that the average YouTube video watched was 2 minutes and 7 seconds. And so I started, going through the different courses that I had attended as a student, and I realized a lot of these were, their lectures, their units, their trainings were like, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes at a time. And there's a lot of times I started a video and I never finished it because I got interrupted or I just couldn't sit there for that long. So I realized, you know what? For the success of the student, I need to make this easy to consume. And let's teach one principle at a time and make them bite-sized. And let's stick to that YouTube range and try to keep it in the 2 to 5 minute mark. And that little shift has just done wonders for the student success. And, we get comments all the time saying, I love the bite-sized lessons. And we put the time on each lesson, so they know how much time they're committed to. So whether it's 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And a lot of folks say, I love it because I can just jump in, learn something cool in Scrivener between phone calls. So it's fitting learning into those little crevices of time. And you know what? It makes it a heck of a lot easier on the creator to create in little bite-sized pieces too. So it's not so overwhelming when you're creating this long 20-minute video, but just teach one thing at a time and keep it simple. And I think, there's a lot of videos in there, obviously. I didn't skimp on the training, but they're just short and bite-sized, and they're broken out into really just highly organized pieces of information. So like you said, people can go and learn Scrivener on their own, but I really developed it for those who they don't have time, or they don't want to waste that time going out, searching this or searching that. They just want to have it at their fingertips so that they can get back to doing what's important for them, and that's writing. And so I think there's a huge market out there today of people that will pay for that time savings in highly organized and packaged content, in whatever kind of content that is, whether it's something you know about or even curated content that people can bring together in an organized manner. So I think those tips, those are huge nowadays when people are in this fast pace. Just tell me what I need to know and don't make me think. This is kind of where people are at today, and they'll gladly pay for that.
But it's not all, a lot of people who've done courses, as do I, and I've had some myself, that they don't always work. As in, some people spend a lot of time on courses and then are very disappointed in things that don't work. So you mentioned, obviously, not getting a pizza delivery job, which, some would consider a failure, but we're going to reframe that as not a failure in your case. But
sure.
Have you had any kind of negative experiences with the training courses, online courses, or what have you learned from other people that you've avoided in terms of things going wrong?
Yeah, so it's funny, the birth of my successful course came out of the failure of multiple other things that didn't take off. When I first started blogging, I was spinning my wheels, trying a bunch of stuff, kind of the whole throw enough stuff against the wall and something's going to stick technique. And I had first started with the productivity blog. And I was getting to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to make some kind of product now, and I want to put it for sale. And so I came up with this, time management, 10 mistakes you're making with your to-do list. Ebooks were like all the rage at the time, and so I was like, I'm going to create this ebook. And I spent months on it, way too long, using every design skill that I had from my corporate job. Probably spent 6 months designing this ebook. It was the prettiest ebook that nobody saw because nobody wants to spend, $30 or $40, I can't remember what I priced it at, to help them solve their time management techniques. There's just some information that it's not something that somebody's going to exchange money for. And so that's something I teach today is you've got to, number one, validate your idea before spending 6 months creating it. And don't waste your time there. But number two, you've got to make sure that your topic, your niche, is something that has a high degree of pain associated with not knowing that information. And so, I talk about different kind of content. There's like sugar content, which is, ooh, that's sweet. That's fun to know, right? And then there's painkiller content where it's like, I've got to take this pain pill. Otherwise, I have this massive headache. So please give me the pain pill, right? If you go to a doctor, for instance, and he's, you're complaining about head pain, and he says, "Oh, you've got a headache. Here, let's try a surgery." You're like, "No, I'm not doing a surgery for a headache. I'll figure this out on my own." But now if he says, "You've got an aneurysm we've got to get you to, sign me up. I don't care how much it costs, right? This is life or death. That's an extreme example, not life or death, but you've got to make that your content something that's so painful, so that people can, they solve their pain with your course. So that's what I learned with some of my products earlier, is that they weren't painful. And it was just very broad. That's my second point, is you want to make sure it's very narrow and focused. A lot of people think backwards on this, and they think, gosh, if I make it too niche, if I make it too narrow, I'll exclude so many people and I'll lose out, right? But the problem is there's so much noise out there today that it's the only way to cut through all that noise and really target and dial in your marketing, so that when somebody lands on your sales page, for instance, they know, oh my goodness, like that's for me. And I give an example of the classic movie Field of Dreams. And if you hadn't seen it, it's about this farmer who built a baseball field in his backyard, right, in his cornfield. He tears down his corn, puts a baseball field, and it's kind of this, if you build it, they will come. And so there's this amazing baseball field, right, and these players come out of the corn because they know it's for them, right? It's a baseball field. And I kind of tell people, what if he had built like a volleyball field and a soccer field and a football field, and then there's also a baseball field? Now imagine them walking out and they're going, I think this is for us. We're baseball players, but it's a totally different field than, my goodness, it's highly specific. So number one, highly specific, and number two, the content has to be a painkiller type of content. And I found that with Scrivener, it's very focused. I tell people kind of try to go 4 levels deep. There's you could say I've got a product to help writers. Okay. Let's take it a step further down, right? Let's do a software program to help writers. Well, let's take it a step further down. Let's do Scrivener to help writers. So it's very focused, so people know exactly, oh, I need help with Scrivener. That's me. And if the pain is enough, which I found it was with Scrivener, because it was very painful and people needed to learn the information so that they could continue on with their writing careers, then you got a winner. So take the time to do research in the beginning and make sure that it has those criteria in there, and you'll save yourself a lot of headache and trouble later on.
Although we say that, I don't know anyone who has come out the gate with their first product, first thing they've ever done, and it's been just an amazing success. You've got to have a bit of failure to help you learn different ways of doing stuff, right?
Yes, get out there and fail as fast as you possibly can. And like you just did with my pizza story, reframe that failure. So a lot of times this mental hurdle of failure will keep us back from even trying. And something I did in the beginning was I reframed that failure into, let's just experiment. It's a totally different feel when you're saying, I'm going to experiment with making this course. Because if it doesn't work, well, hey, I've still got the experience of learning how to put together a course, learning how to connect the dots, and I can use that with something else if this doesn't work. And all of a sudden, the pressure is off of you. Instead of saying, I'm going to create this course and it's going to sell this much, and if it doesn't, oh my gosh, it's a failure. Just approach it from an experimental, as like a scientist, be a scientist, I tell people, and just see what works.
Okay, so I also wanted to ask you about marketing a course because, I'm an affiliate of yours and I know other people who are, and I think that you've mainly partnered with people who already have a platform, as in you don't have an author platform attracting specifically authors to you, and I don't believe you have a blogging platform for specifically bloggers. I mean, have you mainly built the course sales through partnerships, and or how else have you done that, and how have you built those partnerships?
Yes, I definitely have started building my whole platform with partnerships. It's a hard route to go, and I don't recommend it. If you have if you can spend the time to build an audience first, if you've got an email list that you can utilize, my goodness, that would make things a lot easier. But on the flip side, I think I give a lot of people hope, because you don't have to have those things to succeed, and to succeed in a rather short amount of time. It just takes a little bit of hustle and grit in the beginning, because obviously it's harder to connect with a person of influence, right, before you have any credibility. And so it's kind of difficult. You've got to kind of do some grunt work in the beginning. Think about actors. They don't just immediately get their Oscar role, right? They have to start, and a lot of times they do some, terrible movies that later on you find out, oh my gosh, look how they started. And so sometimes you got to just do some stuff on your own. I did a few webinars that were just really small and nobody ever heard of them, but we made a couple $100. And so conversion rates were good, even though the numbers were on a smaller scale. And so you take that and you just go and bring it to the next person and bring it to the next person. And I made connections and network. You want to be helpful. So one of the things I started doing right from the beginning is I couldn't introduce people to anybody because I didn't know anybody. So it's not like I could say, hey, let me help you. I'm going to introduce you to so-and-so. But I found a skill that I found that a lot of bloggers and people online wanted or needed, and that was design. So I had a design background, and I said, you know what? I want to help you in some way. Do you have an ebook or something? I could design a cover for you, or I could do this. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I do have this thing that I could use a fresh design for. Think so. And I would look for anything that I could give them. And then in return, they'd be like, you know what? Oh, let me introduce you to this guy, or let me introduce you to this guy. So give value anywhere and everywhere you can. I started doing this on Twitter immediately too, just chiming into these discussions. It's like the cocktail party, and just jump into the discussions. If you can find a place to add value, add value. It was through a connection that I had met somebody who got me an introduction to Jeff Goins, who I did a Scrivener webinar for him for his private tribe writer group. And that was like a blockbuster success, right? Because it was a very targeted audience. I had been wanting to get in front of Jeff's audience for a long time because I knew his people would really benefit from my course. And so we had great numbers. And you probably don't remember this as well as I do, but after that webinar, I actually emailed you, or I think we connected on Twitter and was like, hey, Joanna, we did this webinar with Jeff. Here were some of the numbers. I think your audience would really benefit from it too. And of course you said, yeah, let's put something together. But what you probably don't know is I had emailed you or connected with you on Twitter probably 6 months before that, and you said no. So probably because you're like, who is this guy? I don't know him. I mean, why would I do this? And so I said, okay, that's fine. I'll come back in about 6 months after I get a little more credibility. And so that's just what you got to do.
Oh, now I'm embarrassed.
You got to play that game.
Yeah, no, and I think, and it's funny because, of course, I don't remember that. And I mean, you will be in the situation I am now where you get hundreds of emails every day for people who are not paying you any money and haven't bought your course, asking questions that you answer in your courses, as I do, and my books, and for free on the blog. People who don't spend the time looking for that information, for example, and lots of pitch emails every single day. And you're right, there has to be something about the pitch that stands out, that makes you want to even spend a minute reading the email, let alone looking at a course. I mean, you know the time it takes to even log on to a course and have a look at the material, that could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I don't want to sound like an idiot, but it's all time that could, that none of us have. And so I'm trying to remember, I can't remember that first time, but I do remember logging onto your course that first time and going, okay, this is great. So the fact is you have an excellent product, and that's why, consistently I recommend your course, because it is so useful. And it's got to come down to that, right? No matter how much you were networking and how much you were connecting, if your course wasn't any good, then people wouldn't be promoting it. But I do agree you've done it incredibly well, and you are a very helpful guy. Which is that just a personality trait, do you think? Because you don't have that. There are some guys online and women who are really, just bolshy and in your face, and you have a very different feel about you, a kind of just a more humble feel.
Well, I think you've got to utilize whatever your unfair advantage is, they say. And so you got to know what your gifts are. And once you know what your gifts are, I think you can really utilize those. It takes some self-reflection. I had done this when I was struggling to figure out what I wanted to do with my career and the whole pizza thing and all that. I was like, okay, what am I good at? And people had always told me, you're so resourceful. Like I'm the kind of guy that if you ask for directions, I'll give you, a printout with, arrows drawn, and I'll draw little landmarks and like kind of overboard, right? Attention to detail. So I was like, oh, great. I'm resourceful. I can give people information in a easy to understand way. Whoopee, what am I going to do with that? Well, when I came online, obviously my resourcefulness has worked out well for me now. And, on top of that, I am just kind of an everyday guy. And so very early on, I realized people could relate to that. I remember screwing up in a webinar one time in the beginning. Somebody asked me a Scrivener question, and I didn't know the answer. And that was like my worst fear on a webinar. I was like, what if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer? And, they're going to think I'm a fraud. And, it's this like imposter syndrome that we have. And I remember saying, oh, you know what? That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I said, if I was not doing a webinar right now, I'd probably log on to my course and watch one of my videos. And I said, I don't know if that makes me a bad teacher or a good teacher, but I actually do go and watch some of my own videos because, Scrivener is such a huge program. You don't use all the features all the time. You kind of forget. And, that little just, being humble and being real. Afterwards, I got multiple emails from folks saying, we loved that when you didn't know the answer. We loved that you were just open. We felt like you were one of us. And man, that was just such a huge relief. And I realized, let's be real from day one and just connect with people on a real level. And I realized that was probably another unfair advantage, I guess, that I had, was that I am just an everyday guy. And I really view myself as that. And so people can relate and think, hey, he's one of us. He's just here to help us. So I think that helps with, your marketing message and all that. But hands down, no matter how you slice it, the more you give, the more you're going to get back. It's just one of those laws of nature. And so whether that's hard for you or comes natural, it's something that can't be skipped over. So if you're always looking how you can add value, it'll always end up coming back to you.
Yeah, I talk about that as social karma. And, it might not come back to you in the way that you expect, but it does eventually. So it come back in some way. But and that authenticity is super important. And you always talk about being a dad and a husband. And, there are lovely pictures of your family on your site. And I think it's lovely. And I know that some people who are really interested in changing careers and becoming an entrepreneur are scared of the commitment or the potential risk, I guess, of leaving the job. Now you have these two young kids. So how did you tackle the risk of doing what you did, making that leap, and how did you offset that risk?
Funny, because I probably didn't handle it very well. Actually, it might appear that I've handled it well on the outside looking in, but the funny story, my name that I've gone online with, Joseph Michael, is actually just my first and middle name. So Joseph Michael, my last name is Nicoletti, which you don't see that online hardly at all. I've kind of put that out there a little bit more as I've kind of, been more known. But in the beginning, the reason I did that was really for two reasons. First, it was out of fear that I was going to fail. Because like I said, I had done lots of things before. And this time I was kind of like, you know what? I don't really want everybody to know about this, new thing I'm starting. So let's just kind of use a pen name. I won't even put my real name attached to it. So then everybody doesn't have to see it and know, oh, Joe's starting something new. And then when or if it fails, so this was kind of my way of just hiding behind this, this name that wasn't really my own, or my full name anyway. And number two was my current employer. So I didn't really want them to know I was, having this outside interest, because I was actually really excited about it and really passionate about it. And my fear was, what if they found out and maybe they didn't like it and they kind of discouraged me from doing it? Well, I couldn't lose my day job because that was the bread and butter that was putting food on the table at the time. And so I don't think they would have minded. It's not like I did any work on company time or that kind of thing. But it was just basically those kind of things out of fear. And then as I've, started putting more stuff out there and things got successful, then I kind of realized that was kind of silly that I was just so afraid of that. And then some parts of me are like, I wish I could just attach my full real name to it now. But, now there's this kind of brand deal and whatever. But that's a delicate a line. It's a hard one. Like, I really relate with people who struggle with that. I don't know if there's a real easy answer. And just, really don't worry so much about what people think. Just try it. Our country, our great world is made up of people who took a chance, right? Who did something that was uncomfortable, whether or not, most people who are the trolls or the haters out there, they're the ones that aren't really taking a chance. They're not doing anything. And so it's easy for them to criticize. Again, reframe the way you look at failure. If I would have done that right from the beginning. And then just little by little, take one step at a time. That's all you can do, right? Like the best you can do is the best you can do. That's what I always say.
Exactly. And I always, I got quite upset about an email I got, or it's a social media thing. You know, a lot of things happen every day, but this one I still keep coming back to. And this person said, you know, Joanna speaks for people who have a lot of books and are doing really well. Who speaks for the person with one book, their first book? And I got really upset because I was like, but that was me. That was me with one book. And my blog, you know, if you go back to 2008, I did only have one book, and this podcast started when I had one book. And it's like people only see us at this point in history unless they've been following us for years, right? And it's just keeping it real and keeping it honest. But as you move forward, it's kind of owning up to your past. And it's funny how we only feel comfortable about it when we've achieved some success. Later on down the road. But no, that's really interesting. And I wanted to also ask you about your family again, because again, you share pictures of your wife and your children online, and this is another question I get from authors who use pseudonyms or are worried about online. Where do you draw the line around your family and your personal life in terms of authenticity? Have you drawn that line, and how do you manage that divide?
Yeah, I think that has to be a personal decision for each person. You know, I don't really think there's a right or wrong. I think you need to be wise. You know, I do think about, I try not to worry about it too much, but I do think about, you know, the risks involved. I don't think I would ever post a picture of, you know, the front of my house where you could see the address or anything like that. You know, you can kind of be craftful, but for me, it's really hard to separate the two, my business, my personal life, because it's all kind of rolled into one for me. So, you know, so much of what I do business-wise is the reason is for my family and then time I get to spend with them. And those are like, you know, the results and the fruits of my work. And so like so much of it is just baked together that I can't help but want to share it. And I feel like with the audience that I want to cultivate, I want them to know more of the real me. And if you're going to know me, you've got to know who I am. And this is my family. And this is, you know, the most important thing in the world to me. And so I don't know, like any proud dad, you just can't help but share, you know, the pictures of your kids or whatever. And I try to do it a little bit more on maybe just my social channels of where I might have a smaller audience, not as public. You know, Instagram, for instance, or my Facebook, you know, my personal Facebook thing. I don't broadcast a ton of personal pictures. But there is that line, you know, there's that line of, okay, I don't want to do it too much. You know, there's others out there like Pat Flynn who has, you know, he posts a lot of pictures on that and he gets the same kind of question, you know. And then there's others who say, absolutely no pictures of my children will ever be online, you know. So it's just a very, you know, whatever you're comfortable with. I think just use discretion, be smart about it. But if it's part of your brand, if you're putting yourself out there and you're okay with connecting with that and having people know about that, again, I think it can help, you know, contribute to the realness of folks and have that everyday connection. You know, that's what it's really all about online. That's what sales is really all about, you know, is that connection, building trust and likability with folks. And that's how we connect. So that's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I look at what I do consume online in terms of blogs or podcasts, and, you know, increasingly it's individuals. It's not magazine style blogs anymore. You know, I might read a couple of RSS feeds, you know, from more magazine styles, but mainly I'm interested in the people behind the site. So sites with individual voices and faces are the ones that I actually care about, whereas things just with a kind of brand logo, you know, I struggle to care about in any way. So I think that's why people like reading books. They like the characters, you know, they want to know what's happening in the characters' writer's world and all that type of thing. So I do agree with you. It's a question everyone has to tackle and make a decision about. Okay, well, you and I could chat forever, I know, but we're out of time. So let people know where they can find you and all your courses online.
Sure. So you can find Learn Scrivener Fast at learnscrivenerfast.com. Obviously, if you're interested in learning Scrivener quickly, you can check out more about me and my kind of personal life, so to speak, josephmichael.net. You could follow kind of all my projects there. I'm very active on Twitter, since that's where I started. That was my humble beginnings of connecting with writers and folks there. So if you want to follow me on Twitter or, give a shout out, say hello there. I'm at Scrivener Coach on Twitter. And those are the best ways to find me. So very shortly, I'll be launching my new course, Easy Course Creation. If you're interested in learning how to create a course that sells without spending months and months of time and getting no results, I will be sharing my past failures and all that with that. So we'll link that up as well if you're interested in that. So thanks, Joanna. This has been a blast, as always.
Thanks so much for your time, Joe. That was great.